Let me tell you something that might not sit well with a lot of people who are chasing the next big marketing breakthrough, but it needs to be said anyway. Most of the time, the thing that you think is missing from your strategy isn't a secret hack, an advanced tactic, or a new platform of some sort. It's the basics, the fundamentals, the boring stuff you already know you should be doing, but probably aren't doing really well. And I mean really doing well, not just set and forget it, but actually committing to and refining it over time. And I get it. The basics don't spur headlines. You don't hear about them on marketing podcasts. No one's going to go on and on about consistent follow-up emails or clear value propositions. You don't see viral posts about businesses crushing it with solid, well-built landing pages or a beautifully written confirmation email. But here's the truth. The basics are what make all the other stuff work. They're the foundation. And if your foundation's shaky, all that high-level strategy you're so hyped about, well, it's just a house of cards waiting to fall. You can't out-strategize sloppy fundamentals. So let me give you an example. We've worked with clients who were obsessed with running Facebook ads. Great. Big budgets, beautiful creative, killer targeting, but their website looked like it was built in 2015 with zero user experience in mind. The message wasn't clear, the offer's confusing, the forms are clunky and long. So guess what happens? They spend a small fortune on ads and conversions tank. And then they think Facebook ads don't work. Well, really, they just never had the basics in place to begin with. They had their ad machine driving traffic into a busted funnel. Or how about this? Everybody wants killer content, right? People want the secret recipe for going viral, but when we dig in, they've got a blog that they haven't touched in months. Their email list, cold as ice. Their social posts, random and inconsistent, like they were thrown together 5 minutes before publishing. No game plan, no strategy, no rhythm, no clarity, but they're still out there trying to figure out how to game the algorithm as if that's gonna magically fix the underlying problem. You don't need to game the algorithm, you need to give it something worth surfacing. That starts with consistency, clarity, and a real understanding of your audience. Not just personas on a slide, but actually knowing what makes them tick, what keeps them up at night, what language they respond to. That's basic, and that's also what works. It's not rocket science, but it does require intention. Here's another way to think about it. Basics are like fitness. Everybody knows that they need to eat well, sleep well, and exercise, but we get caught up looking for the magic supplement, or the 15-minute miracle workout instead of just sticking to the tried and true. Same thing with marketing. You want to grow? Get your reps in on the basics. Look, I'm not saying innovation doesn't matter. I'm all for testing new things, staying ahead of the curve, and adapting when needed, but none of that matters if you're skipping the fundamentals. And I see this all the time. Smart business owners, sharp marketers, even agencies with great intentions, but they're tripping over the same things, the same cracks in the foundation. And it doesn't matter which tool they're using, it's not going to fix that. You've got to do the work on the ground floor first. So let's talk through some of these basics. First of all, messaging. If your message isn't clear, if people don't instantly get who you help and what you do, everything else falls apart. I'm not talking about clever taglines or award-winning copywriting. I'm just talking about plain, clear human communication, the kind that makes somebody go, oh, this is exactly what I need. You're not writing for a boardroom, you're writing for people who are busy, distracted, and overwhelmed, and honestly, kind of skeptical. You've got 5 seconds, most time, probably even less. If your value proposition can't pass the 5-second test, it's broken. If I land on your site and I have to scroll and hunt and decode your offer or figure out what you do or what you're selling, I'm gone. People don't have the patience to work through that confusion. They move on fast. Think of your messaging like a storefront sign. If somebody can't see what you sell by driving by at 30 miles an hour, you're invisible. Okay, next, consistency. This one's a killer. Most people treat marketing like a New Year's resolution. They start with great intentions, go all in for a week or two, and then real life kicks in, right? Priorities shift, momentum fades, and their daily blog posts or weekly emails become a ghost town. It's not that they don't care, it's that they didn't build a habit. They started the marathon with a sprint. The brands that win are the ones that show up over and over and over again. They keep putting value out into the world. They build trust not with flash, but with repetition. And yes, that's basic, but it's also powerful. Consistency compounds. It's like compound interest. One email won't change your life. One post won't build up a following, but show up daily, weekly, predictably, and the impact starts to multiply. Okay, third, execution. I see so many people with massive Asana boards or Notion pages full of ideas, strategies, and plans, color-coded, beautifully organized, even scored by priority, effort, that kind of stuff. But none of it's live, none of it's published, none of it's out there working for them, and here's the thing, ideas don't move the needle, execution does. Marketing only works when it's put into action. You can brainstorm, map, and plan until your eyes bleed, but if it's sitting in Google Drive or in somebody's head, it's not doing anything. The market doesn't care what you were planning to say, it only sees what you put out into the world. Execution isn't just about speed, it's about momentum. It's about releasing, imperfect work, getting feedback and making it better. That's the cycle. Plan, execute, learn, and iterate. Without that loop, all you've got is a digital junk drawer full of unrealized potential. And let's not forget follow-up. That's what still crushes it. A well-timed email, a thoughtful text, a personal call. The basics of human connection haven't changed. Even in the most tech-driven marketing environments, people want to feel seen, heard, and valued. And when somebody reaches out, whether it's through a lead form, a comment, or even a click, they're signaling interest. The window to respond with care and purpose is really small, and most businesses fumble that step. Most businesses lose leads not because they're getting beat by a competitor, but because they never followed up or didn't follow up fast enough. They just let the lead slip away and chalk it up later to, maybe they weren't a fit, but the truth is they might have been a perfect fit, just not right in that moment. Or maybe they needed more info. Maybe they needed reassurance. Maybe they needed somebody to care enough to just say, hey, following up, any questions I can help you with? When you treat leads like relationships instead of transactions, everything changes, but that takes effort, that takes follow through, and that takes discipline. Not a complicated funnel, not a new CRM integration, just basic human effort. And it still outperforms most fancy automation sequences when done right. So listen, if you're thinking, yeah, I'm probably dropping the ball on a few of these, well, good. That means you've got a lot of room to grow, and probably without needing to overhaul your whole strategy. Most of the time, it's not about tearing it all down, it's about tuning it up. Just do what you're already doing, but with more intention, more precision, and more consistency. It's about doubling down on what works, not chasing what's new. So let's talk a little bit about web presence. Nobody needs a $100,000 website to convert traffic, but you need speed, you need mobile responsiveness, you need clarity, you need people to come to your site and instantly understand your product, your service, your brand, and why it matters to them. You've got to make that connection in seconds or you're going to lose them. And that means no jargon, no clever nonsense, just a clear human explanation of what you do and why it matters. It sounds obvious, right? But you'd be shocked how many websites fail on these points. They get so caught up in trying to look innovative and stylish that they forget clarity trumps cleverness every single time. A nice looking site that confuses people is worthless. And speaking of obvious, let's hit one more basic, that gets overlooked all the time, the customer experience. And I'm not just talking about what happens after they buy. I mean from the very first interaction, from the very first click on your ad to the last thank you email, every touch point is marketing. Every moment is a chance to build trust or blow it. That's the game. That's the funnel most people aren't even looking at. The brands that win aren't just delivering good products, they're delivering great experiences, seamless, frictionless, thoughtful. So before you run another campaign, ask yourself, what's the experience like? Are the forms easy? Are the pages fast? Do your emails make sense? If not, start with those basics. I'm going to leave you with this. If you're always looking for the next edge, the secret sauce, the breakthrough tactic, take a pause and just go back to the basics. Go through your site like a customer that knows nothing about you. Read your emails like somebody who doesn't know your brand. Look at your ad creative and ask if it's going to actually stop you from scrolling. Walk the journey from start to finish. Audit your process, not in a fancy special way, just in a grounded, common sense, no BS way. And you're going to find opportunities, not because you need to reinvent the wheel, but because you probably just need to realign it, adjust the pressure, rotate the tires, bring it back to center. That's what most marketing efforts need, not a brand new direction, just a better calibration. So start there, do the basics better than anybody else, and then go experiment, then go innovate, then go scale. But if your foundation sucks, none of that's going to matter. The campaigns won't land, the content won't convert, and the funnel won't hold any water. Fix the first floor before you build the second story. Here's your challenge. Pick 3 basic things this week that you know you've been half-assing. Your follow-up, your welcome emails, your product descriptions, your site speed, your mobile layout, your cart abandonment sequence, whatever they may be, fix them. Make them airtight. Make them better than anything your competitors are doing. That's where the growth is, not in the tricks, or tactics, not in the hacks, in the fundamentals. Executed well and executed consistently. That's the stuff that works, and it always has.